As soon as I started to figure that out, that I don't actually have to listen to what my mind is telling me immediately, and it very nearly killed me. And I spent 2 nights in an Irish hospital. We ended up in an extremely strong current.
How do you share about the art of failing forward?
I had to eventually admit to myself that there is something bigger that is holding me back. I started to write a list as to what I maybe could have done differently myself.
What impact did that have for you?
3 of us made it and 3 didn't.
So Ryan is one of the world's most respected extreme cold water swimmers and a leading voice on mindset, resilience, and high pressure performance. He has completed more than 140 Robin Island crossings, conquering swims such as Antarctica at -1 degrees. This was one of the most dangerous waters on the planet. Today, Ryan helps leaders, teams, and entrepreneurs understand how fear, discomfort, and uncertainty can unlock growth. Through his talks and workshops, he teaches practical tools for resilience, execution, and navigating pressure in fast-changing industries. This is a powerful reminder that your mind is either your greatest obstacle or your most valuable asset. Ryan continues to inspire thousands around the world to break their limits and push past impossible. So let this code activate something deep within. Enjoy. So Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Yeah, man. Awesome to have you here. And when I came across your profile and all that you're doing with your keynote speaking, open water swimming, and this key message of pushing past the impossible, I thought that message will resonate so much with the listeners. And I'm just curious, where was that born? Pushing past impossible. Where was that born?
Yeah, well, it's a great opening question, and it's a message that, it's a kind of payoff line or a theme that I came up with just because it's so personal to me. And it's something that I used to, before I was ever on any kind of public stage, it's just something that I used to repeat to myself. And what's really important about it, it's not pushing past impossible, something that someone else is impossible. It speaks very much to you. What's your impossible? So that's where we drill it down a little bit to find out what you think is impossible to you and how do we figure out how to achieve it. So that is kind of where it stemmed from, because I was starting on this swimming journey of mine and I was starting to do things that I really didn't think I could do. And as soon as I started setting goals I didn't think I could achieve, it started to open my eyes as to what's possible. And now I'm very grateful to take this message. I put it together really, really nicely and in a way that opens eyes and opens minds. And I've taken that around the world.
Amazing. Yes, it's pushing past impossible piece. It's so what I'm hearing there is the first step is actually figuring out what is that impossible mission that you want to go on. So where was that born for you? Just to give context to the listener of who is Ryan and where is this message coming from?
Yeah, for sure. So Ryan, first and foremost, complete average Joe. Nothing special about me. No clever ability to self-heat my center core and to survive anything better than anybody else. Ryan was a couch potato at the age of 29, loving the TV remote and getting fat, and made a small adjustment to my life and kind of took a client away for a beer for incentive weekend. And we were sitting there on the patio on the stoop having a beer, and I was moaning about how unfit I am, and he said, "Oh, well, join my little swimming squad," which I duly did because I promised my client I would, but I can't. Monday morning comes and you're like, "Oh no, did you really make that promise?" Anyway, off I went and I got into the swimming pool and started to build some fitness for myself. And that started the most fascinating journey. So firstly, just the fact, and this is obviously all very personal to me, just the fact that I got off the couch and started to join a little squad where there are people who would notice if you didn't pitch next time, it kind of puts a little bit of pressure, and then you start to meet people and you become part of the crowd. And through that process, I started to enjoy the swimming, and I moved it out of the swimming pool into the ocean. And if anyone knows Cape Town, South Africa's waters around Clifton and Camps Bay, they are cold. They average between sort of 8 Celsius up to 16 Celsius. It's not freezing, but it's hard to stay without a wetsuit for an extended period. And I started to do small swims in the cold water, and it wasn't long before I realized just how profoundly the element of cold impacts a human. is we have not evolved well to handle the cold. We've evolved very well to avoid it. So when we throw ourselves into cold water, a whole barrage of defense mechanisms happen. The mind goes into overdrive, pain, panic, fear. The body sends all its blood rushing to from your extremities into your center core. And that happens for everybody, but you don't really notice it. It's just a horrible procedure. But I started to do this over and over and over again. And I realized it wasn't that quick, to be honest, but over time I realized what it was doing to my mind and how it was steering my mind to a negative place. The element of cold makes you negative. It wants to keep you safe, so it wants to get you out of that environment very quickly. And that's a good thing, because the cold water will eventually kill you, but it's very, very overzealous. And as soon as I started to figure that out, that I don't actually have to listen to what my mind is telling me immediately, there's a lot of margin on the uncomfortable side of the line. That's where the growth started to happen, and that's where Ryan's journey started, because I realized that I could push a little bit past what my mind is telling me to do, and I started to challenge that quite profoundly, firstly in South Africa and then around the world in colder and colder and colder waters until we reached the ultimate cold. Does that give a little bit of an overview?
Yeah, it's really helpful, and it resonates with me personally. Like in my own journey of almost like, for example, what's present at the moment is learning how to skydive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the same thing, like the first skydive went up, there's a guy called Rainer and a guy called Jerry who was like guiding through this experience as the instructors. I remember I like get onto the edge of the plane and we got this sequence and I like look up and I like look down and I'm like, what are you doing? Like on the edge of this plane?
I could imagine.
The wind is swelling. It's like,
yeah.
And like everything that I'd learned went out the window. Because like under this extreme state of fear, and then similar to yourself, like over exposure and doing it again and again and again. Now on jump 12, currently in this episode, and
well done.
The fear's still there, but it's becoming safer and safer. So no, it really resonates in the sense.
Well, that's absolutely, and there's so many messages in that. You're starting to rationalize the fear. That's what you're doing. That makes you a little bit more resilient in that area of your life. You're understanding why you're scared. You're understanding what your mind is trying to tell you. It's trying to keep you safe. It doesn't want you to jump out of a plane. It's an extremely unnatural thing. So it's reacting accordingly, as it should. But when you are brave enough to override that without being silly about it, clearly you got a parachute on you and the experienced chaps on either side, at least you start. That's how you grow. That's how you build. That's how you elevate your platform when you start setting your next goal. And that's exactly what happened to me just in the element of cold water.
That's amazing. I'm curious for you as Ryan, like what was your driving force to even like step into that discomfort and put yourself in freezing cold waters? Like we can go into the story around Antarctica, where swimming a mile in Antarctica in freezing cold water.
Yeah.
But like, what was your driving force? Like, what were you? Yeah, was it you were trying to prove something to yourself, or was it more of an external driver? Like, I'm curious, what was your driving force?
Very much internal. And that's very important to me that does come across. So no one was interested in what I was doing. No, I certainly wouldn't tell anyone what I was doing. But I set the goal of trying to swim from Robben Island to Blouberg Beach. For your listeners, that's where Nelson Mandela spent, I think, 19 of his 27 years incarcerated. It's a 7.3 kilometer swim in rather cold water, and it's very interesting water. There's everything that scares you and stings you and irritates you on that swim. So it's psychologically quite difficult. And it used to be an absolute Everest for me. There were people who I'd heard of who had swum this Robben Island before. Then I met someone who actually had swum it in my swimming squad that I joined, and I was starstruck. And long story short, I eventually set that as a goal. And I remember taking that on. I've now done that swim 144 times. So for a long time, I was the guy who's done it the most in the world. There's someone who's overtaken me now. But why I'm telling this story is because this is what really, really gripped me at a point. I started to do these swims, and I was just, at first it was just to do the swim and feel good about myself and get from A to B. And, it's a big challenge. You got to train hard. So it was just that kind of surface level discipline that you had to apply. Then once I started to repeat cold swims, especially, let's just talk about this Robben Island swim. Once I'd done it many times, I started to understand some things that were happening, because you got a little support boat alongside you, usually, because you don't want to be out there all by yourself. You may not touch the boat. It's just there to observe and to act as your eyes and your ears, because it's very hard to find direction, so you just follow it. And I started to realize that on every single Robben Island crossing that I was doing, at some point, I'd start to get negative. I would start to actively look for reasons why I can get out of that cold water into that little support boat where I know there is hot chocolate and a blanket that I can wrap around myself. And even though I know without a doubt I can make it to the beach, I've done it before, how many times? I'm fit enough, absolutely know I can get there. All I can think of is how I can get out of this situation. What excuse can I find that I'm not going to lose face with my friends and other swimmers who know I'm doing the swim today? How am I going to find the right excuse to get back into that little boat and wrap that blanket around me so nobody questions me? I always make a joke on stage. It's like, everyone wants to ask, does he ever see sharks out there? And I always say, like, a cold water swimmer wearing a Speedo sometimes prays for a shark. You almost want them to see a fin, because then they will pull you out very quickly and it won't be your fault. So it started to dawn on me over all these repeats that there is something happening in my head that is working in the background that I am not controlling, that is not allowing me to make this uncomfortable environment that I'm in work for me. All I'm doing is looking for ways and excuses to get out. And then you start looking, hey, that whole old boring comfort zone thing that everyone talks about. All I'm trying to do is get back into a comfort zone with the right excuses. And that was an epiphany for me all those years ago, that there is something working in my head, and it happens for everyone in every aspect of life, by the way. But when you're in freezing cold water, because we haven't evolved well to handle it, all these very super powerful defense mechanisms come to the front of your brain, and you can almost touch them and feel them and see them if you pay enough attention. And again, through all the repeat exposures, I started to realize that this was a safety mechanism happening in my head that I needed to figure out how to override to a degree. Don't be stupid, because the cold water will eventually kill you. But I can extend my time in this cold, and how do I do that? And that was like an amazing, let's call it epiphany. It was a challenge said to me. I want to extend my time in the element of cold. How do I do it? How do I become positive in that environment? How do I get the negative thoughts out of my head and look for the positive? And then that's obviously many years later became messages that I now take around the world, because you take that into any business, and they've got cold waters, they've got sharks, they've got currents, they've got wind and weather, all obviously similes for what happens to me out in the water. It happens in their boardrooms as well. And I've just joined the dots on that, and I give wonderful direction on how to push past your own impossibles.
Yeah, I mean, that message in itself really resonates in the sense that everyone and anyone listening can just tune into where in their life is that cold water, whatever that is for them, but something which is moving the state of being from a state of safety into a state of danger, which, like, using cold water or using, jumping out of a plane with a parachute behind you, like that automatically puts you in that sense of a danger state.
How do I get out of this?
Yeah, so I'm curious for someone who's listening in, who knows that they've got that thing which is creating a stimulation in their body, or in their mind, which is making them track for danger. But they've got a goal that they're looking to work towards, but they're avoiding it. They're either flighting and moving away from it, or they're fighting and trying to resist it. Like, how can someone, I know you're touching it with exposure, but how can someone start to navigate those and that thing in their life more skillfully?
And it actually sounds like an easy question, an easy thing to do. But for most people, because I also do a lot of one-on-one coaching, I interact with a lot of people, they don't know that that's happening. So they haven't got it as clearly defined as you've just laid it out. They've got a goal, but there are 100 excuses why they're not doing it. And that's all they see and all they believe, because that's this powerhouse mind of ours that is steering us. So just to take one step back, part of the messages that I take out to the world is, we have this human mind, which is the absolute gateway to greatness. I mean, it's just an awesome thing. But I argue, and this is actually what I did a TED talk around, but that this powerhouse of a mind of ours actually works against us most of the time. When things get tough, when the going gets really tough and you need it the most to help you in a difficult situation, it is geared and designed and evolved to send you in the opposite direction, to find all those excuses that you possibly can and reasons why you don't have to face that fear that you're in. And that's, I call the cold water my classroom. You said, how can people find their own thing? Cold water has been, I don't want anyone else to jump in the cold water. That if you want to go for it, but it's not my mission in life to get everyone cold exposing like old Wim Hof. But I say find your classroom, and I think that's what you're alluding to. What is something that really scares you, or something that makes you uncomfortable and you just wish it didn't, because on the other side of that there's something you'd like to achieve but you've long since forgotten about it. Find that classroom and figure out how that can start teaching you rather than just sending you in the opposite direction.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's like, I like that frame of find your classroom, and also like life can be the classroom too, right? It's like, say whether it's in your relationship or whether it's a certain part of your business, maybe public speaking or social media, or like, where is it that you have that threat, that danger response? Is it like a communication with a friend or with a family that you're avoiding?
Yeah.
And it's like, these are also areas in life which can be a classroom, or similar, like you could have just jumped out the cold the first time you went in and was like, this isn't for me.
Correct, which is what 99.9% of people do. And it makes perfect sense. And, absolutely. I just started doing it more and more because that's what I chose. And it unlocked a level of awareness as to how my brain is working, how my mind is working in a really difficult situation. And I'm sure we'll get to it later in the story of, where I've gone with the swimming and the level of cold, and how that has pushed me. Of course, some wonderful disasters along the way, which make it far more colorful. But the lessons are just beautiful. And I think what I wanted to say as well is, and I know you do some coaching as well, Sam, but I sit with a lot of people and I always ask, depending the circumstance, but have you set yourself a big goal for this quarter, this year, whatever it is? And without a doubt, everyone's always set a big goal, right? Because they know I'm going to ask the question. And I said, like, is it something that's going to challenge you? Yes, it's always something that's really challenging. And I always say, okay, well, explain to me, how on earth are you going to hit that goal? That sounds daunting. Oh, well, no, it's, if they do this, that will happen. If they do that, then they're going to do this. And they generally 95% of the time will describe exactly what they're going to do to reach that big, scary goal. And I say, but hang on, you've just given me a complete roadmap on how to hit a goal. And that, I suppose you have. And then I have to explain to them that you are not getting outside your comfort zone. If you know exactly how you are going to achieve that big, scary goal that you've set, that there's no growth attached to that. That might make you happy. You might still hit your number, put food on the table, do whatever, life goes on. But if you're looking for growth, if you're looking to get to the next level, if you're looking to broaden horizons, you've got to find the goal that you don't think you can achieve. So find what looks scary to you and then go, hang on, what if I add X to that? Can I do that? And if you go, oof, no, I'm not going to do it, that's when you need to sit down with yourself and start unpacking it a little bit. And that's luckily what I did. And this was not in my personality to do growing up, by the way. I was never be that guy. But the classroom that I chose taught me that I am so more capable, or so capable of doing more than what I think I can do. And every swim I started to do, and every challenge I took on, taught me something more. So I started to set swims that I didn't think I could achieve. I didn't know how I could achieve. And that obviously took us all the way to swims that you shouldn't humanly be able to achieve. And, you figure out a way to get there. And it's just been a wonderful journey.
Fascinating. And I'm curious, like, what was the big shift for you to go from the Ryan before, who was more the couch potato Ryan, and to actually transition into this Ryan who was like, I'm not just going to set the goal which stretches me, I'm going to set the impossible goal.
Yeah.
Because that's a big transition.
Yeah, it is a big transition. And I hope no one thinks it happened overnight. I didn't wake up with some massive epiphany. It happened slowly. I just needed to get a little bit fit. I've always enjoyed swimming. And I had this client who encouraged me to join in his swimming squad. So swimming's kind of the direction that I ended up going. But it's important to note, and I actually, because often I'm doing keynotes on stage, so your 20 years of experience are condensed to an hour. So it sounds like you jumped in the cold water and suddenly you were superhuman and survived it. But it's a long journey, and it's you have to have the old story of you have to have a why attached to it. Why are you doing it? You asked me that up front, and it was because I started to realize that there's more to what's happening upstairs in my head than what I'd ever known before. It also taught me that I can start to control a little bit what's happening in my head. Not always. I still get nervous. I still fail. I still do all the human things. But it's impacted where I set goals. And it's impacted how I go about trying to achieve them. And it has also impacted, and this sadly is through experience, how I process it when I don't get them right, when I fail. It's very important that you fail forward, and that's also, again, very easy to say, a lot harder to do.
Yeah. So how would you, for someone who is in that motion of maybe feeling like they're failing, whatever failing is, right? How do you share about the art of failing forward?
So I talk a lot about failure, and again, I try and take my messages a little left of center, where everyone knows, I'm sure everyone listening to this has heard the narrative a million times, that failure is part and parcel to growth. Failure is good. Every entrepreneur out there, every billionaire has failed more times than he or she has succeeded. We've all heard those narratives, and that's absolutely true. I take nothing away from it. But in my experience, there are two kinds of failure. There's the failure where you shove it under the carpet, where you find all the excuses as to what happened and to why, and they're always going to be brilliant excuses because they're easy to find and they're always under there. They're always lying around and easy to access. And you then generally go on, in speaking for myself, set another goal, that's bigger, and, trying to get your ego a little bit back to where it should be. That to me is it's the bad kind of failure. And it's the failure that's going to repeat itself. And it's the failure that doesn't deliver any growth. So there's nothing good about it. Take that failure and go introspective. Allow yourself to become vulnerable. Easy for some people, very difficult for others. I was in the very difficult side, but I eventually was forced through a story I'll share with you in a bit. Actively look for what you could have done differently. Even if your excuses are legit and genuine, find out what you maybe could have done in the build-up to that challenge that might have impacted that. Actively find reasons why you could take a little bit of blame for that failure, because that just helps you to be honest with yourself. And once you do that, once you realize that maybe there was a little bit of a role, and even if there isn't, it's still a process that I encourage, because that's the failure that delivers growth. It's a failure that delivers learning. It's the failure that's going to force you to change something, to do it differently the next time. That's the failure that's going to elevate the platform that you stand on a little bit when you're setting your next goal and how you train for it. Or, we're talking about, I keep using the word train, and that suggests sport. Obviously, I'm a sportsman, but it doesn't have to be that. It's how you prepare, should be a better word.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the good failure is the failure that you grow from, and you don't naturally grow from failure. You've got to make it worthwhile.
Yeah. So the lessons that get drawn upon on that journey, which is really going to teach your system whether it's something that you grow from or not. I'd rather than just avoiding it and then setting something bigger to try and put your ego.
Correct. Yeah.
Because
which is exactly what I did. I was, tell me if you want to hear the story, but this is, all my stories that I share, all the lessons are from experience, hard experience in kind of in my real world. And I had a lot of swimming success. So started from nothing and worked my way all the way up to various really difficult challenges, a lot in and around Cape Town and South Africa. And then I went across to do the English Channel and got that right the first time. So much bigger, world-renowned swims, and I had success after success after success. And then I set another challenge up in Ireland. I was trying to swim from Ireland to Scotland across the North Channel. And basically, I got kicked in the butt quite hard with that and contracted something called SIPE, which is swimming-induced pulmonary edema, which I didn't even know existed, but it's a thing. And it very nearly killed me, and I got fished out 20 kilometers into that swim. And I spent 2 nights in an Irish hospital having my lungs drained and very, very nearly drowned. And there were so many people watching me, waiting to see if I would succeed in this extremely difficult challenge, that I was so embarrassed. I was so disappointed. The years of training that I put in and the expense and just the loss of face really hurt me. And I reacted like most red-blooded males do. And it was to come out firing, to set the next challenge, to blame the weather, to blame the crew, to blame the currents, to blame everything I possibly could. And once I had my wonderful story around, I could share with everyone as to what had gone on out there, and not an iota of it had anything to do with me. And what I didn't realize, and this makes a wonderful story, which, I won't elaborate on hugely because I don't know if you want that kind of level of detail, but what I didn't realize was I never processed that failure. I completely mismanaged it. And life goes on, right? But that mismanagement lives in your head. It's part of you. So now I'm setting new goals, doing the training. I've got the team together. I've got it all figured out. I've done the research. I've found the money to do it. But I just couldn't find the shoreline. I couldn't get myself. Something was stopping me. Every time the stars aligned and the weather was right and the currents were right and the moon was right and the sharks were somewhere else and, everything was working, I would find some reason not to do it. And again, this was an epiphany for me later in my swimming journey, because 3 years in, I had to eventually admit to myself that there is something bigger that is holding me back. I'm talking about this thing. I'm ready to do it, yet I can't actually get my ass to the shoreline and look across this. In this case, happened to be False Bay, which is here in South Africa. It's a 33-kilometer stretch of really psychologically difficult water, and it's a long swim. And no one had ever swum from the west to the east. Okay, there had been 5 successes before me, and they'd all swum from east across to west. It's kind of the flow of the wind. The southeast pushes that way, and I think there had been about 30 attempts and 5 successes, and my goal was to be the first guy to swim the other way, the way no one thought was a good idea. And yeah, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And eventually, getting to the end of this long story, I had to sit down and figure out, really introspect and figure out what is going on. I used to be quite tough and resilient, and now I'm doing lots of other stuff. I think, sorry, let me interject, because this is really vital. In that 3-year period where I was not finding the shoreline of this very big swim, I was achieving. I swam the Bonifacio Straits, Italy to France. I swam lots of Robben Island crossings. I swam all kinds of things that impressed the hell out of a lot of people. But they were all 100% within my comfort zone. I knew this. Other people don't, so you're getting all the accolades and the pats on the back, but I know that I'm underachieving for me. It's this other swim in the opposite direction that I really wanted to do that I knew would test me, and I couldn't find it. And once I went introspective, this is remembering 3 years after my failure, I started to unpack it, and I started to really realize, hang on, this is all stems back to that failure. And then I started to write a list as to what I maybe could have done differently myself. And, from better sleep, from better nutrition, to less impatience, to lots of things, to less arrogance, to less complacency, to a loss of discipline, because I'd had all this wonderful success before, all kind of added up. And as soon as I had that all on paper and in my head, it was a complete epiphany. It was like, wow, if I just do all of that differently, I'll nail this swim. And literally, it was like a turning point like that. And it just, once I then did that swim, and I got a Guinness World Record for it and everything. So it was, lots of rah around it, and it made me feel good, and ego was back intact. And when I sat down, I realized this is something I need to share with the world. And it's turned into a wonderful keynote that I call either Failing Forward or Beyond the Summit, whichever works well. Because Beyond the Summit, as in after lots of success, often you've positioned yourself for a big fall, and that's what I did. And if you mismanage that fall, you're going to be treading water like I did for 3 years.
I really appreciate you sharing that, because it's
Fish.
yeah, it's an important thing to note, is that actually, like, and this is a lot of the work I do with clients, because a lot of the time where there's these blocks, right, where it sounds like here, like an event happened and then there was a block which was unprocessed.
Yeah.
And then when that unprocessed block is like running the show and it's not being processed or moved through, it's like, it's often the invisible, right?
Yeah.
And even when you track back to like childhood, like often there's many blocks which have happened in childhood, which if just pushed down and suppressed, literally are running the show, where there's a fully grown adult who's actually like a little boy who's running the show as a fully grown adult, right? Because there's things that are not integrated. Have you also done the same with that, as in gone back and been introspective around you when you were growing up?
I certainly have.
Yeah.
I certainly have. I'm blessed to have had a wonderful childhood, so there's no deep dark demons that bug me too much. But there is a lot of, sometimes you'd ask the question, what would you tell 13-year-old or 15-year-old Ryan? And it would all relate around confidence. Confidence. I lacked so much confidence in myself, and I had to go on a personal journey to figure that out. And now at my ripe old age, I work what you're talking about. I don't know if you know, Tim Galway is well known. He came up with the equation, which I love and I work with it a lot, is that your performance is equal to your potential minus interference. And I spend a lot of time with a lot of people talking about interference, because we all have interference, and that interference takes away from our potential, and that obviously impacts how we perform in whatever area of life. And it's just a very nice linear equation to say, like, it's so simple. You're going to underperform unless you figure out what your interference is. And if you think you don't have any interferences impacting your level of performance, be it in sport or work or social or whatever it might be, you're dreaming. It's there. It's just a nice way to actually unpack that, and to, as soon as you write your interferences down and you acknowledge them, which is, I would guess, the vast majority of people go through life without ever knowing it even exists. But they just stay in their lane the whole life, where they deliver, where they're happy, they're comfortable. But there's so much on the other side of the line. I talk about 2 lines in my keynotes, by the way, it's just so that everyone knows what I'm talking about when I talk about lines. I'm an inspirational speaker, and quite often us inspirational speakers go on stage and say, anything you put your mind to is possible. Just think it and you can do it. No, I'm not that guy, right? I'm a little more rooted in reality, I like to think. And, certainly in the element of cold water, there are only 2 outcomes. Either you're going to warm the ocean up to your temperature, or the ocean's going to cool you down and you're going to die. And that's the more likely. But what I do preach very loudly is where your mind, your very powerful mind, is trying to keep you safe, is telling you it's the end point for you, turn around. It's not the end point. There's a lot of margin on the other. So I talk about these 2 lines. The mind's end point, where the mind of Ryan says, not a good idea. That's as far as you can go. Versus another line, which is way to the right, if you can picture a slide, and that is the real end point. And beyond that is danger. We don't know exactly where that is. And some of us push those limits to try and see how close we can get to it, or shift it a little bit further to the right. But if you turn around before the mind's end point, you're going to underachieve. You're going to be robbing yourself of growth. So when I say underachieve, you might be happy in that level of underachievement. You might, life goes on, steady performance, everything's okay. On the other side of that line, if you're brave enough to say, hang on, mind, which is hard to do because you are you and your mind is you. But if you can take a step back and say, look, why did I make that decision? Why did I turn around there? Why was I so scared to step over the line that my mind told me was not the right thing to do? And just see what happens. Do you know why? Because on the other side of the line is where you open the door to failure, where you're going to be a little bit more vulnerable, where, things, you're going to get responses that you don't know what those responses are. Sometimes those responses are negative and you can't control them, and that ends in embarrassment and humiliation and all those things. So much easier just to turn around and say, okay, sure, no, not for me. I'm not going to try. However, most of the time, I'd say 95% of the time, the thing that you try that you didn't think you could achieve, you will achieve it. And that already, pushes you up a level, and there's growth in that. If you don't achieve it, absolute guarantee you're going to learn stuff. So you can't really lose as long as you're not stupid about it.
Amazing. Yeah. And what impact did that have for you? The achievement piece and almost like proving internally to self of like, hey, like you can do this. What impact did that have on your relationship with that younger
Yeah.
part of yourself? The one who was, the confidence was
Yeah.
more of a challenge.
Yeah.
Like what lessons did that teach that part of you?
It pretty much everything, and again, it wasn't like all of a sudden, okay, now I'm confident because I figured it out. It's been a journey for me, and it's ongoing.
Yeah.
The public speaking thing, I stand on stages, and everyone's heard of the imposter syndrome. I've had that in droves, where I came up with these messages that I've taken from the ocean and my extreme challenges around the world, and they're beautiful, and they're rich, and they're really, really effective and valuable. But then all of a sudden, I'm hired by a small group, I'm just hypothetically speaking, of CEOs, C-level executives running massive multi-billion corporations. And they hire me to talk them through and how they can do better and position their mindsets. Now I go and absolutely, I know I'm going to deliver value to them. But in the beginning, that was a hang of a journey for me. I'm standing there wide-eyed looking at all these people who's reached success that I will never reach, or I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say that, but and I used to lack confidence. And it was those moments that taught me the most, because now I'm hired, I'm standing there, I've just got to deliver, fake it till you make it was in my head. And I would deliver my stories. And I started to realize that there's nothing faking it at all. Afterwards, a lot of these execs, some of the CEOs of the top corporates in this country still phone me up to ask me stuff, which still blows me away, but I love it. I'm used to it now. So why that obviously helped my confidence is because I have seen firsthand the value that what I'm sharing is delivering, and it's genuine, and it is from school kid level to top CEO exec, and I work a lot with entrepreneurs as well. So
Yeah, I noticed even like HSBC, you've worked with them over in the UK.
yeah, I have. Yeah. And I also work a lot with entrepreneurs organizations, so EO, which in fact, I'm back to Nashville now in January to go chat to their chapter there. And then I go to Kenya to chat to their chapter. So I work a lot with the entrepreneur space as well. So yeah, to answer your question, it's this process. I got confidence in the swimming world quite early because that was, just digging deep in my own personal journey. Then I started standing on stages, and it took on a life of its own. I never thought it would take off, but it certainly has. And 12 years later, and I've traveled the world sharing these stories. And that has done immense stuff for my confidence, because there's never, ever been a time that I've been hired for, no matter who the audience is, everyone walks away, or at least they tell me that. Maybe they're just being polite, but after all this time, I'm pretty sure I would know if it wasn't working. And that's given me great confidence, because it's also given me new horizons, because I'm still doing swimming stuff. And, when you're aware of what your pain and your process that you have to go through to survive the swim, or to make it from A to B, or whatever you've set yourself, you understand what I'm going to learn in that. When I'm finished the swim, I actually sometimes think this during the swim, when I'm finished this, I can't wait to sit down and write it down, because once again, I've learned something new about myself and how I reacted to something that happened out there. And I can relate that beautifully in a story to showcase to people, which will just open their eyes, and they'll be able to draw the parallels between me in the cold water and them in the cold office space, in the classroom, wherever they are.
Classroom of life. Yeah. I just celebrating you too for your willingness to push those limits and to, be so introspective as well. Because I think that's a gift, and that someone can build, of like looking at certain events, looking at certain challenges, and actually introspectively being like, hey, what am I learning from this? What am I learning throughout this process? And then taking those lessons and applying them into something else. So perhaps you have like a story which really lands and resonates this point around like pushing past limits. I'm thinking around the Antarctica experience, because even just like painting the scene of what it's actually like to dip into the Antarctic Sea.
Yeah.
And then also what you learned from that level of discomfort inside of your system and how you were able to navigate that. And just the final point on that is for the listener, coming at this from a frame of Antarctica and that sea and this experience, whatever Antarctica is for you right now, like just bring into your mind's eye, like that part of your life which you really truly want to step into, but it's really uncomfortable, and then help this story land that home to help you move into this.
Well, I hope it does. So just for context, myself and a few like-minded friends, we had been on this journey to start. We've discovered that we can do better in the element of cold if we understand what's happening in our minds, and we can start to maybe swim a little bit cold and a little bit further. And we started to do this process and understand what it took to recover, understand what's happening, the physiology of it, understand what's happening in our minds, and to apply it and to train hard and to really toughen ourselves, body and mind, and then to set different goals. And for a long time, we traveled the world setting goals that we kind of knew we could achieve, or we knew were possible, but we weren't sure if we could achieve it. But we knew if other people had done it, and we knew if we found the time to do the training and did it properly and found the money to get wherever we needed to go, we'd get it done. We had then reached a point, and I'm going to revert back to the I, because I don't want to talk for the other guys, but I'd reached a point where I wanted to now take on a challenge that I didn't think was possible for myself. And the challenge we took on was to try and swim a mile south of the Antarctic Circle, just in a Speedo, goggles, and cap. So there's no grease, there's no wetsuit, obviously. You can't even, we started an organization, a guy called Ryan Stramrood started an organization called the International Ice Swimming Association, of which I'm a founding member, and it sets certain rules. Maybe I should just clarify what those rules are, because we swim under their banner. The International Ice Swimming Association says if you want to say you've done an official ice swim, you have to swim a 1 mile distance, that's 1,609 meters, wearing only a Speedo type costume, one silicone cap and goggles. Again, no wetsuit, no grease, no Band-Aid. We're going to be totally pure. You have to swim that 1 mile in your Speedo in an outdoor body of water, so you can't have a roof over it. And that body of water needs to be 5 degrees Celsius, which is 41 Fahrenheit or below. If you can swim a mile and you can prove to us under what the International Ice Swimming Association says how you have to prove it. You need like 3 different thermometers and officiators and that, because the thermometers, there are a lot of margin in them, so we need good brand ones. Anyway, so we set this up, and Ram did a lot to make it all official and to an association. And we decided that we wanted to see if we could do an official mile under the International Ice Swimming Association, following all our own rules in Antarctica. And that turned out to be one of the most brutal and most eye-opening and most growth-filled experiences of my entire life. And this could be a very long story, so you tell me how you want me to nutshell it. Because, being a bunch of South Africans, we couldn't, if we're not sponsored either, so we couldn't take our own ship to Antarctica. We were paying passengers on an ocean liner that was going there anyway. We also couldn't take our own support team because it's expensive to go on a passenger liner to Antarctica. And we spent a lot of time getting permission from the holding company of Quark Expeditions, or Quark Expeditions was the company, to allow them to give us permission to allow their crew to help us and to understand that we've got this mission. Because remember, they've got 180 passengers on that ship, and they've got a schedule, and off they go. And Antarctica is not to be messed with, by the way. It is a hectic place. It's not always what you see on Discovery Channel, like beautiful flat water with blue skies and a whale frolicking in the distance and some ice. It's quite wild. It can be. I mean, the weather is hectic, and 1 second there's no ice there, next second you can't even walk there. It's like just solidly ice. So to go and swim there is a very, very daunting challenge to take on. And we wanted to swim south of the Antarctic Circle, And we found a cruise that was going south of the Antarctic Circle. They don't all do that. And then they were only south of the Antarctic Circle for, I think, a day and a half or 2 days tops. So we really needed the weather to play ball in those 2 days. And unfortunately, it didn't. So it was a big blow to us. We got all the way south of the Antarctic Circle and we wanted to swim, and the crew would not let us because it was just, the weather was crazy, let's be honest. And let me not put it on them. We would have probably seen our end if we did try it. However, that aside, on the return journey, just on the other side of the circle, north of the circle, we did get to make an attempt. And the water was measured at -1 degree Celsius, just 30 Fahrenheit. The salt water freezes just a little bit below zero. And it was, there's a whole longer story and all the hassle and being on standby for 7 consecutive days before we actually got to make the swim. And eventually we got to give it a go. And I swam for 32 minutes, where the research was telling us in those temperatures, you've got 10 minutes to perform at max before all the blood has now rushed you away from your extremities. So just for your listeners, when you swim in cold water, what is happening is all the blood rushes from your extremities. So not just toes and fingers, from your calves and thighs and biceps. All that blood rushes out of those muscles into your center core, where it sits. And the reason is you can live without arms and legs, but you can't live without a heart pumping blood to the brain. So the blood leaves those extremities to protect your heart. The problem with that is, it's all very good for the survival, obviously, but the problem is when your biceps and legs and everything got no blood in them, they've got no oxygen to feed them. So those limbs become very uncoordinated and they lose a lot of power, which of course is a spiral or snowballing effect, because that means you're going to swim slower and it's going to keep you in that water for longer. So we had to, obviously we've trained for this, we had to be really, really aware of it. And we set ourselves a lot of limits, and we had the crew that were going to make sure they pull us out, and no leopard seals were going to eat us. I can't tell you the things that went wrong in the build up to this. But eventually I managed to complete an ice mile at -1 degree in Antarctica in 32 minutes. And when you are pulled out of that water, you very, very, very close. You're so hypothermic. You can't help yourself. So you've got the team just help me to our recovery facility. And there's some wonderful footage that I show in my keynotes where I'm sitting in this recovery. There's no shivering. I'm just like absolutely blank. My eyes are vacant. And I'm in deep distress. And that's where our training really kicks in, because we have trained, and the secret to our training at the time was that we make sure that we do not train our minds to that when we climb out the water, that's the end of the swim. The end of the swim is after the recovery process.
Got you.
And that's a very, very important distinction. So anyway, that's a long story. I'd love people, if you are interested, read my book. It gives you all the ins and outs and details of what actually went on behind the scenes, which is quite fascinating. But it was a world first official ice mile in -1 degree Celsius. Yeah.
Mate, celebrating you, man. That's
Thank you.
Insane. Like, to even think of, there's one thing going for a cold dip in the sea here in Cape Town.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cold. Like, and that's what, like, you're doing that was -1 a mile. And just to unpack that, because the Antarctic -1, for whoever's listening, that challenge, that goal is going to be unique to them. But it's a very, like, in that achievement of the goal, what I'm hearing was like the first step was actually becoming aware of what are all of the things that we need to be aware of on this journey. Like, there's some life-threatening stuff here.
Very much.
Which I'm not saying that in someone's like normal, goal, there may be some life-threatening stuff, there may not be, but it's still that awareness around, almost like building the picture of and that preparation phase. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, so that is preparation is everything. So if we did not prepare exceptionally well for the swim, I can tell you now, someone would have lost their life. That said, despite the best preparation in the world, there were a million things that we didn't foresee, because we're not preparing in Antarctica, we're preparing in Cape Town. Then we get on a ship and we go to Antarctica, and it's nothing like what we've ever seen or experienced before. So clearly our training was very much around understanding our mind and how it's going to operate when we impact with that cold, and how do you not succumb to the hyperventilation, the pain, panic, and fear in your head, and you deny the ability of rational thought. You can only think one thing, and that is, how do I get out? You can't say, how do I make this really harsh environment work for myself? All the blood is rushing from your extremities to your center core, so it's very, very disconcerting and painful, right? We've trained hard to figure out how to get through that. Then what we also learned was that there's a thing called a leopard seal. I did no idea this thing even existed before, and they're quite prevalent down there in Antarctica. And of course, they're 400 kilograms of muscle and mischief. These things are very inquisitive, and they've been responsible for a number of deaths. So we became aware of that just before we jumped in as well. So that's another thing impacting the mind. Then when we took on the attempt, we ended up in an extremely strong current that we didn't see and couldn't know about. We know about the currents here in Cape Town and when to swim and when not to swim. In Antarctica, we didn't know. We anchored an ocean liner where we finally found some time where the passengers were happy to not photograph penguins and ice and give us the time to do our swim. And off we went, and we went headstrong into a current, which meant the end for a couple of the guys who were attempting it. There were 6 of us in total, by the way, and 3 of us made it and 3 didn't. I'm just trying to build a little bit of a picture. We swam 833 meters from the ship to a GPS point and back. So that made sure we got a full mile, 1,609 meters. It was absolutely brutal. But I think where you were going with your question, Sam, sorry, I've spoken so long, I've kind of forgotten, is what I now preach, or not preach, I work with a lot of people to find what is your ice water.
Yeah.
Right? That's the environment you've chosen. I chose to swim in ice water, so I can't moan about it, but I have to understand it. I have to understand why it's hard and why not everyone else does it. And there's a lot of things you need to understand about ice water, what it's going to do to you. What is your leopard seal? That unexpected thing that slipped through your preparation, that is dangerous and is going to plant an element of fear and potentially make you not even jump in and give it a go. What is your opposing current? There are always currents out there. There's always something in your life that's going to work against you. So you've got this wonderful plan. You've got it all planned out. You've done the training, and you jump in, and all of a sudden everything's working against you. How are you going to make that work for you? What are you going to do? How are you going to control your mind? Because when you're being pushed backwards, it can make you negative really quickly. And as soon as you become negative, negativity just spirals. Negative energy takes you down. We'll talk about more of that. What's your great white shark? That thing that is there this time. Probably not going to bug you, but is petrifying. It's a human instinct to want to avoid it. What's your iceberg? All those things that I work with people to say that, here's my story. This is how I overcame all these different elements, which are very, very symbolic for a lot of things that are happening. And listening to your story, I can already see where your leopard seal is. I already know what your current is. So let's talk about it. And those are all your interferences, which are detracting from your potential, which are impacting your performance. I hope I answered that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, I was like, I'm picking it in a way where that first step being the preparation piece, which I think is often avoided, and it's easy to just jump straight into something. But actually, this preparation, especially when you set a goal as big as that, and something which is impossible to self, like at that moment in time, like when you're picking it and preparing, that's one thing. And then the second part is actually like when you're in the water, in freezing cold water, again, whatever that water is for the listener, it's like there's this ability and skill to be able to handle this nervous system, the body, the mind under these intense stresses when you're doing something new and you're doing something that you've not experienced before. It's like, what were you doing in those moments to be able to navigate those extreme circumstances? Because someone who's set a big goal, whatever that is also going to have that. They're going to have fears that arise, stress that arises, those voices that arise that tell them they need to get out and stop doing it. Yeah. How do you navigate those situations?
Through training. So it's training and understanding. If you don't understand, if I didn't understand what was happening, why I was thinking the thoughts I did, why I was feeling the pain I was feeling, it would have been a lot more playing into my fear. But I understand it because I've now done it how many times. I've worked slowly in different temperatures all the way up. Okay, so preparation on that level is absolutely vital. In the moment, I'm feeling all of that. So I kind of know my own processes and thought patterns that I need to exercise while I'm swimming. But swimming in what we just did is extremely individual. So even though I swam with 2 other guys on each side of me, I didn't even know where they were. They disappeared within the first minute. It's an extremely solo sport. So it's up to me to get to that point and back. That said, if it wasn't for my team, the umbilical cord to my life, I would not have made that swim. Okay. So firstly, my own preparation, my own thought process, my own toughening my mind, my own understanding of what's happening. And very secondly, the right team in the little support boat alongside me, because I was petrified. You're dying. You can feel your body is shutting down. The odds of me getting back to that ship, am I going to get my hand to that little ladder to get out the boat, out the water onto the boat before the cold takes me down? That was 100% thanks to my team. They couldn't touch me. They couldn't do anything for me other than smile and give me thumbs up and give me the security that they are watching me. They're not WhatsApping a buddy or photographing penguins on the other side of the boat. They are watching me, eye contact. And that gave me the strength of mind to push a little bit past what should, without sounding cheesy, should have been impossible on the day. So yeah, those are the 2 things: awareness, understanding, preparation. That's one, and the right people alongside you to help you make it. No matter how solo the sport is, it's always going to be a team effort.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I'm so glad that you touched on that as well with the team element. As you can only go so far on your own, right? And in those situations, like having a team where there's people who are there around you, they're supporting, they're with you.
Yeah.
And that's changes the game.
Yeah.
And also what really resonates, and I think is important to share here for the listeners, is that sometimes it can make more sense when you're in Antarctica water at -1, it would make sense that your system is going to go into a fight or flight and a threat state or a shutdown and a numbness. Yeah, like sometimes, and I'll share something that's like vulnerable and personal for me of what I used to experience inside of a relationship, because like things like in my business and achievement and pushing myself over my limits, I was fine. Like I could do that. I can meet those edges. Yeah, like in relationship, like even just a challenging conversation or when like emotion was too intense, I would notice that same experience inside my own system where I would go into either like a fight or flight state, or typically would also go into this like numbness and shutdown and wouldn't be able to kind of like even express or get my words out. So I share that to normalize that actually like these natural systems of the nervous system where we feel safe or we feel fight or flight or we feel shut down, although it makes sense in Antarctica in the water, may also be showing up in other areas of your life that may not make sense as much, but
100%.
That's okay as well.
100%.
Yeah.
And thanks for sharing that. That is exactly what I speak to. So again, I'm not trying to get you into cold water. And I never in any stretch of the imagination thought that the cold classroom I chose would teach me so much about the human mind. You cannot learn this stuff in a classroom or from a textbook. Okay. And every single person, what you've just shared is happening on some level to every human. And again, 95% of people go through life and just ignore it and shove it away. And I beg your listeners, if something resonates with you, from what we're just saying is to actually do yourself a favor. If you want to grow as a human, if you want to grow as a person, take some time to understand that area of your life, as scary and as uncomfortable as it might be. Because when you understand what's happening, and sometimes it's hard to identify. So the first thing is I always teach awareness, be aware, believe that it's relevant to you and it's not just something that's happening somewhere else, and then be brave enough to try. So if you're aware, firstly, of this is happening in my life, and you're saying you got these feelings like inside of you, and you're aware of that. Now you need to believe that is actually impacting you negatively, and accept it. Believe and accept are two. It should be the same. Yes, okay, I actually believe that is impacting me, and I accept that there is something I can do about it. You still got to choose whether you do something about it, and then you got to be brave enough to say, right, I'm actually going to look at it. And you might not like what you see, but I'm sure, I don't know, have you looked at it? Have you challenged yourself? Have you overcome it, or at least improved in that area?
Yeah.
You have.
And it's work, right? It's like, and actually what you're sharing really resonates, because in that area, first of all, was the awareness piece.
Yep.
And it was like, first of all, being aware that, hang on, in these certain situations, sometimes like I'd be absolutely fine, and then in other situations it would be very trigger, and I'd be aware it would almost be like something else is taking over. So I'd be aware that certain patterns that were more protective or defensive patterns were running the show.
Yeah.
And actually, like the next stage, which was really hard to do, because there was a part of me that wanted to resist all of that and fight against it, because that works for me inside of other areas.
Yeah.
Like, because I could just push, like I could, just go through it.
Yeah.
Whereas especially in relationship, it didn't really work as well. So I have to learn how it's like,
You got another party to that relationship. Push back.
just push through. Yeah, it's like, that's destructive. So I had to actually learn to befriend
Yes.
that inside of self, and almost like welcome it in rather than push it away. And that was really helpful. And then also like to just be like, there's because I followed like the ABCD with this, and then to be curious would be the next step of like curious, like where's that coming from? Like the introspection of like, where's that showing up? Like, why is it showing up? And then that almost helps to integrate it. And then that helps with the D, which was like then to deepen inside of self, to deepen like the love and compassion, which especially in a relationship then allows you to come into connection, which is just like almost like singing off the same hymn sheet. But I felt like it was important to bring that up, because for someone who's listening in, there may be something so small in their life that they're noticing the same patterns of the story.
But I love that you brought it up. I really do, because it's it takes away from swimming, which a lot of people will battle to relate to. It's you've just humanized it beautifully. And there's something I've never shared before, and I've only started doing this in the last year. And it's going to sound completely lateral, because it is, but it's a great exercise. So I want to challenge your listeners to do similar. I mean, we're all in this new age where we have algorithms that feed us on whatever we scroll through, right? I'm sure your listeners know what I'm talking about. And I'm the same. And we also all know, well, hopefully everyone knows, that the more you watch of something that appeals to you, the more you're fed of that thing. So if you start to really watch longer minutes of the thing that you agree with, you're going to get more stuff that you agree with. Okay. And I know this, right? And I now actively look for people I disagree with to follow on an equal level. So when I'm flicking through YouTube shorts or Instagram reels, whatever, I want to hear, and this can be just opinion about anything, but in my case, it's largely political. And I follow the States because I spend a lot of time there. So I follow their politics a lot, and obviously our own back here in South Africa. So I listen to the people that I can't stand, to be honest, but I force myself to listen to them. And every time I do, I get like a boiling feeling inside of me, the way my finger comes out to start commenting and tell them how wrong they are. And it's been a beautiful journey for me, because it's made me, then I stop. I never message. So like I withdraw. I often write it off and I delete it. But I've taken the time to actually go, this person, okay, they might, they're educated, they are that is, how can they possibly have that opinion? And then you say, what is their background? Where are they coming from? What is their goal? Does they truly believe what they're saying? I completely disagree. But it's been such a fascinating journey for me to take myself out of just the narrative of they're wrong and that's bull dust and they're stupid, to actually listening to their opinion. I don't have to agree with it. I never do. But my biggest, it's not an argument at home with my partners. We chat a lot. And, often she'll say something and then I'll always say, but this is probably where they're coming from. And now she knows me by now, so she knows I'm not on that side. But it's been fascinating in our relationship as we now talk a lot more openly about the stuff we disagree about. I could never do that before because I'm so set in my ways of what's right and what's wrong. And I still believe in what I believe, but I understand other people's opinions better. Some I will never understand. But I hope this is coming across. I'm sorry, I've never articulated this before. But
I really appreciate you.
In an absolute nutshell is, listen, if you're being fed an algorithm, make sure you follow some people that you completely disagree with. Maybe it's religion, maybe it's whatever, maybe it's politics. And just listen. Give them their 30 seconds on the reel and listen. You don't have to agree with it, but the more you do it, the more you'll start seeing their side and all the people who agree with them. And you can start to cross-reference. Just for interest, for growth,
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing, because this is a relational skill that I've had to develop as well. And I was, through just relationships and through, you learn that actually we all have this inner program, which, and everyone believes inside, like wholeheartedly, whether it's right or wrong, like they have their own beliefs, their own
believe what you believe,
And especially for relational connection, it's like having that ability to see someone else's perspective and maybe not agree with it, but actually understand it. Allows connection.
That's it. Understand it.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different level of growth. Something that I'm on a bit of a journey to do. Hasn't changed the way I think and what I believe, but it's been great to take arguments, because so often, friends and that will make a comment, which I would have usually just nodded and agreed and supported. Now I go, but hang on, just totally agree that that's rubbish. However, this is why they think that.
Yeah.
Have you considered this? And often, sometimes they tell me to sod off, and sometimes we have a good discussion about it.
That's awesome. And it's sort of like great coaching arises from too, right? Where great coaching, relational skills is like that curiosity of, oh, that's interesting that they believe that. Like, I wonder where that comes from.
Yeah.
And then
that's like come from some. Yeah.
Where does it? So, no, I really appreciate you sharing that. So thank you. So Ryan, at this point of the episode, we have a vault section. So in the vault, each guest will leave a message, and then that will be added into the vault. And there's also some mystery messages in there.
Right.
So at the end, like, you can leave a message or a question, and then that may be picked in the next episode or 10 episodes time. But yeah, would you be open to picking a message, and then also we can have a conversation around that? The listeners can have that introspective, like, insight around what that message means for them.
Yeah. What was the most pivotal turning point in your life that made you who you are today? Be detailed. And that's from, is it Wizard James?
Yeah, James Zander. He's been on the podcast a couple of times.
Oh,
yeah. Awesome.
All right. So the most pivotal turning point in my life. Wow. I've had a couple of left and right turns in my life. And James Wizard here wants lots of detail. Okay, let me think. All right, let me give it. Obviously, it's going to be a swimming story. They're not all, but when I was a very young swimmer, just starting to make a name for myself, there's a swim from Robben Island to the mainland that we spoke about earlier that I've done 144 times. But there is a swim to another. You don't always have to go to the same point. The longest and most difficult swim is to a place called Three Anchor Bay. So it's an 11-kilometer swim, and no one had done that on their first attempt in under 3 hours at this point. This was many years ago, right? So I decided as a youngster novice swimmer that I was going to be the first to do this. And there was this myth, actually, well, it's a fact of there was a specific current that someone had spoken about called Cutler's current. A guy called Barry Cutler had once done the swim, and he was quite a lot slower than me, and he found this current that just whooshed him to the coast. And I thought, I've got to find Cutler's current. And I did as much research as I could, and I wanted to be the first to do a sub 3 hour swim. Remember that water's cold and it's a long way to swim, right? So I went and I found Barry Cutler, and I got him on the boat, and I said, right, Barry, I got him out of retirement. He's the late Barry Cutler now, and I want you to find me Cutler's current, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to swim as hard as I possibly can, and I'm going to get there in under 3 hours. And I was convinced I would. And I swam, and we didn't have the GPS watches in those days, so there's a GPS on the boat. And I knew if I swam really hard, they would stop me in an hour. I asked them, in 60 minutes you stop, because I just quickly need to hydrate, feed. And I knew I should be about 4 kilometers. If I was 4.1 kilometers, then I was looking good for my sub 3. And I swam as hard as I could that first hour, and I pushed and got to the hour mark, and they stopped me. And I said, right, did I make the 4.1? And they said, Ryan, we don't know how to tell you, but you're on 1.8. And we'd managed to found the opposite of Cutler's current. Now, if anyone does any kind of endurance sport, especially cold water swimming, that is soul destroying, because now you've still got, you think you're 4Ks in, but you're only 1.8 in, and you've got a long way to go, and you're now in a head current. Most people would pull out. And I was swimming with someone else the day. He pulled out, said, no ways, that messed his mind up. We then swam again another hour, and I'd only done 3 kilometers. After 2 hours, I still had, 11 minus 3, another 8 kilometers to go. Long story short, it got dark, but I never got out. I refused, and I eventually finished the swim in 5 hours and 24 minutes. Okay. And I was mortified, because I told everyone I'd do it in sub 3, and now I'd done a 5, the slowest swim ever that's been done. And when I announced this, or this kind of became public knowledge, no one said that's embarrassing, haha. Everyone just could not believe that I didn't get out, that I stayed in, and I actually fought that current for 5 hours and 24 hours and finished. Now, that thought didn't occur to me that was a impressive thing. It was just I'm going to flip and finish what I started. And it was a pivotal moment for me, because I saw it completely different as an embarrassing moment. The swimming world saw it as, wow, this guy's got something, remembering this is when I was a novice. And it changed the way I thought about myself, that confidence thing we spoke about earlier, and I repositioned what was a dismal failure of a goal, but yet one of the biggest successes in my life, and that accelerated my journey to bigger and better things. So I'll peg that as one of the most pivotal moments in the life of Ryan.
Amazing. I mean, that really sums up beautifully as well with the episode and that title of like pushing past
past your own impossible.
Past your own impossible. It's like that's in itself is really sums it up, because sometimes like that goal, that mission that you're on may not go to plan, but what I was hearing there in the story, what really resonated was around the art of persistence, and how you persisted through it when it would have been easy to jump out. And actually, that in itself is a lesson. Like, yeah, sometimes you may get number 1 or the fastest or whatnot, but actually training your own system that, hey, like I've got you even in these kind of circumstances, we're going to move through it.
Yeah.
Like what a lesson that is to yourself. So.
Amazing. Yeah. And I had to go the extra mile. We had to change the course, so we couldn't just swim to the land where the point we wanted to do. We had to actually swim dogleg out to sea to try get out the current, which became too strong for me. And then dogleg back, so it was probably like a 13 and a half, 14 kilometer swim in the end, and that is exceptionally hard to do in the moment. And it's this whole pivot thing. You had to change. We had to come up with something or fail. And in the moment, I didn't know I was doing it, but in retrospect, I did it naturally, and it gave me what I needed.
Amazing. So for the listener who's got to this point and they've listened through the whole conversation, and there's been so many golden nuggets in there from the different stories and which you've told, which I really appreciate you being able to articulate your stories in a way that allows someone to listen, and it certainly did for me, and actually take the thing that is present in your life and apply these different stories to that. Like that's a real skill that you have. So I really appreciate you
Thank you.
being able to articulate that. But yeah, what would be like the golden nugget that out of everything you've learned from all of these swims, all of these challenges that you've done from the keynotes,
Yeah.
like the golden nugget was you're like, right, when I drop this to you and you have this as a takeaway, then this will be like really transformational to your life.
Yeah, I've got so much, but I would like to use Oliver Wendell Holmes's quote, which I live by and I think is so simple but so beautiful, is that a mind expanded by a new experience can never return to its original dimensions. Simple as that. Think about that. So if you're staying inside your comfort zone, you're doing what you know you can achieve over and over and over, sure, you might be happy, but your mind is staying in its same dimensions. Try something new. Fail, succeed. Your mind cannot go back to its original dimensions. You will grow. Can only get bigger and better and more knowledgeable. And it's, I just to quickly jump left of field, Robben Island, which I've done 144 times, used to be the absolute Everest for me. It was impossible. It soon became a training swim, and it is a platform that I stood on to set new goals. So every time you do something new, your horizon changes, and I hope the listeners take something out of that.
That's incredible. I think your stories and your journeys that really articulate that quote in a beautiful way. And what an amazing way to finish off this episode. Can you just repeat that? Would you be open to repeating that quote one more time?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a mind expanded by a new experience can never return to its original dimensions.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Such a pleasure.